everyone, and welcome back to Think Outside the Board. This is another edition of the Kickstarter Weekly, and this one is looking at games that will complete their funding from October 4th through the 10th. Now, I have 7 games to talk to you about today, so without any further ado, let's just get started. The first game on the list is called Sushi Boat. It's going to complete funding on October 5th. They had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. They're currently sitting at $34,000, which is just under 1.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 2 to 5 players. It plays in about 30 to 75 minutes. I'd class this one probably at medium light on the complexity scale, and we're going to class this one as medium low as far as risk goes. It's being published by Japanime Games, and they've done a lot of successful Kickstarters. Now, this game is essentially a memory game with slide push mechanics and set collection. And it's very thematic. Players are dealing with sushi on a conveyor belt of sushi, and the dishes are going to move along the conveyor belt as turns are taken and the game goes on. And then players are going to be taking worker placement spaces, essentially, that will give them an action and also allow them to eat the sushi that is in that same spot. And then as the game continues, the sushi bowls will keep moving along the track. Now, there's an area of the board at one end where the bowls will actually go underneath for a while, and you won't be able to see 2 or 3 bowls at a time. That kind of hooks into the memory part of the game, which is that players can trigger something called the Wasabi Challenge periodically. And when that happens, players will need to remember which colored bowls are underneath the part of the board that they can't see. And if they successfully guess that, they'll get perks. Now, this mechanic seems to me to be included to try to get players to always remember where all the sushi boats are. I think without that mechanic, players would just kind of ignore the various colors of the sushi boats. But this mechanic incentivized players to keep aware of where all colored sushi bowls are at all times. Another really cool thing about this game is that it is on a wooden board, and the wooden board is recessed, so that as you have these sushi bowls, they literally will be inset on this board and they'll slide around the track very easily. However, that means that the board that comes with the game is a heavy wooden board. So I think anyone who's considering backing this Kickstarter should take a look at the shipping, because the shipping weights of this game are probably going to be a lot higher than normal because of the weight of that wooden board, which is included in the only version of the game. So there is no version without that heavy wooden board. Now, there's 2 designers on this game, Dario Masarenti, and this appears to be his first published game, and Franco Testini. And Franco has currently worked on 15 Days, Tang Garden, and Xeon. And the artist here is Evin Kwan, who has previously worked on a game called Love Formula. Finally, the publisher is Japanime Games, and they're probably best known for Heart of Crown, Crossmaster Arena, and Tanta Cure. Now, there's only one pledge level for this game. It's a $60 pledge, so you're either pledging that level or you're not. But again, do a double check and see what the shipping is, because I do expect that the shipping will be higher than normal because of this heavier wooden board that's included with the game. And finally, Japanime Games is looking to deliver Sushi Boat in September of 2022. Now from there, we move on to a game called ScandalOh, which is going to fund on October 6th. ScandalOh had a minimum required funding goal of $11,500. They're currently sitting at $46,000, which is over 4 times that minimum required funding goal. ScandalOh is designed for 1 to 6 players. Games play in about 45 to 75 minutes. I'd put the complexity level on this one at medium light. And this campaign is going to have a high risk involved, and the reason for that is that the publisher has only fulfilled 1 other Kickstarter, which is called Awkward Guests. Now, like Awkward Guests, this is also a deduction game. Awkward Guests got a lot of popularity because it's sort of like a more gamery version of Clue. And it seems to take that formula of Clue, which was so popular for so many decades, but put it in a package that can appeal more towards gamers that want something a little bit more from their games. And Awkward Guest has been very, very successful, but it's produced by this company, which is a Spanish company, and it's not really easy to find copies of the game beyond what was delivered with the original Kickstarter. So the designer on this is Ron Gonzalo Garcia. He is the designer of Awkward Guests. And there's a lot in common between this game and Awkward Guests. In fact, it feels like a variation on Awkward Guests that may appeal even more to sort of mainstream gamers because it adds in a few more mechanics. Yet at the same time, I've heard that it lightens some of the mechanics more than Awkward Guests did. So in some ways it may appeal more to gamers, in some ways it may appeal less. But there is a Kickstarter for it right now, and you can acquire this game, which cannot be said for Awkward Guests. So do your research there, find out which game you like better, but this may be the only game of those two that you can easily find right now. Unless you get lucky and you find a secondhand copy of Awkward Guests somewhere at a decent secondhand price. Now there are two artists on this game. The first is Samuel Gonzalo Garcia. The second is Laura Medina Solera. And both of those artists have worked on the two games that were published by Megacorpin Games, Awkward Guests and another game called Monstarg. And finally, the publisher is Megacorpin Games, and they have published Awkward Guests and Monstarg. It's a silly name. So there's two pledge levels for this one. The first is for $38. It's going to get you the base game and the Kickstarter exclusives. And then there's a second pledge level for $49 called Editor-in-Chief, and that will add an expansion called Breaking News into the package. Now the game works with an app, but this Breaking News expansion is sort of app independent. So this is an expansion that you could play without having to use the app, and it has 36 scenarios in it that will not be included in the app. So it's kind of 36 exclusive non-app scenarios. And Megacorpin Games is looking to deliver ScandalOh in September of 2022. From there, we have a pair of games that are going to fund on October the 7th. The first is called Arkosa. Now, this game has a minimum required funding goal of $20,000. They're currently sitting at $19,000, which is about 92% of that minimum required funding goal, which means they haven't met it yet. However, if you look at most Kickstarter campaigns, independent of their size, so whether we're talking about Kickstarter campaigns in the millions of dollars or in the tens of thousands, I'm not going to talk about games that go beneath that, like games that don't fund, that only make a few $100s, because I think that offsets the scale. But in terms of games that make in the tens of thousands to the millions, it's pretty consistent that they do about 2/3 of their funding in the first 24 hours and about 1/3 in the last 24 hours. And then everything in that middle is kind of just extra that doesn't amount to as much. So the fact that Arkosa is sitting within $1,000 of that funding goal, and they still have that final 24 hours where they're probably going to do about 1/3 of their funding, I'm very confident that this game will fund. I think the only way that it won't happen is if the publisher and the designer get cold feet and cancel the campaign before it funds. And I know they've run the campaign once before. They made less money then, and they canceled. So I'm hoping that they don't cancel this time, because I have a little bit of a soft spot for this game after looking at it, and I want it to fund, and it's going to fund. So I hope they don't get cold feet and try to go for a third shot. I think that could hamstring them more than just seeing this one through, because this campaign will fund if they leave it alone. Now, Arkosa is going to play 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 50 to 100 minutes. I'm probably going to set the complexity on this one at medium light. It's very much on that medium line, but I don't think from what I've seen that the mechanics veer into the medium heavy. So I think we're fairly safe in calling this a medium light game. And then the risk associated with this one is going to be high, because it's essentially the second Kickstarter that this publisher and designer has done. And the first one, the only one that they delivered, was a very small card game called Goblin Goblins. So this game's main mechanics are action points, trading, and set collection. And thematically, it is a space-themed game that's set on another planet where the atmosphere has become hostile to live in. And so all of the alien species, the races, have gone underground, and they're living in various bunkers. And there is another alien species that has been made aware of essentially kind of like their distress signal. And so they're going to come down to the planet and they're going to rescue one of the bunker colonies. So essentially each player is in charge of a bunker colony. They're running that bunker colony and they want to make it as good as they can. They want to kind of expand the colony and make it a prosperous colony. And if they do that, then at the end of the game, they will be the one colony that is saved from this planet's extinction. Now, this game does look a little rough around the edges, and I think you should know that if you do pledge it. I mean, if you look at the art, it is sort of equally parts charming, but it's not quite as clean as a lot of games are. So I'm not sure how much of it is going to get cleaned up going to full production from what we're seeing in terms of both the art and the design. If you look at the board, it's got two colors to it, and they're very kind of bright and loud and not necessarily easy to look at. So I think there are some things graphically about the game that aren't as polished as they could be. And I think if you back this game, you should know that going in. You should be honest with yourself that this game may be a little bit rougher around the edges. However, I'm really, really charmed by the theme of the game and kind of what I'm seeing. So this may be something that you want to back, but go into it knowing that this is going to be, I think, a little bit more risky than most campaigns, just in terms of the quality of the finished game. I could be totally wrong. Hopefully I will be. But I think it's good to be aware of that risk going in. Now, the designer is named Angela Dickens. She's designed one other game before. It's called Goblin Goblins. The artist is named Maddie Harrison, and this is going to be her first published game. And then the publisher is called Toonhammer. It is Angela Dickens' company, and of course their only published game to date so far is Goblin Goblins. Now there is only one pledge for this game. It's $48, not including shipping, of course. I never include shipping in these prices that I'm throwing out because they're different from country to country, and they're even different in Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. But the pledge itself, not including shipping, is $48, and it's called 1x Arkosa. And then finally, Toonhammer is looking to deliver Arkosa in December of 2022. Our second game that's going to be funding on October 7th is called Solar Sphere. They had a minimum required funding goal of $13,500, and they're currently sitting around $88,000, which is about 6.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game designed for 1 to 4 players. It's played in about 60 to 90 minutes. Now, this is another game that looks like it's kind of straddling that medium light, medium heavy line, but I'm going to guess that the complexity on this one is actually more in the medium heavy range. And I'm going to set the risk on this one at high. That's because there is a lot of kind of first time designer and publisher stuff going on, although it may be of note to know that the developer on this game is Johnny Pat Canton, and I have a lot of love for Johnny Pat Canton. So I think that's important to know going into the game, that there will be some amount of Johnny Pac's fingerprints on this game, and I think that can only be a good thing. And finally, this is a sort of space-themed dice placement game. Now, the first designer is named Aidan Lowther, and Aidan previously designed Solar Storm, which is kind of connected to this, right? Solar Storm, Solar Sphere, and these are the first 2 games published by Dronda Games. And they also share that same designer. The other designer is named Simon Milburn. He previously worked on a very small game called Kitten. And then we have 2 artists on this game. The first artist is named Igor Urshov, and this appears to be Igor's first published game. The second artist is named Elias Stern, and he has previously worked on Lander and Solar Storm. And finally, the publisher is named Dronda Games, and they have previously published Solar Storm. Now, there are 4 pledges that we need to talk about on this one. For $45, you can pledge the Crew Pledge, and that will get you the base game and the Kickstarter extras. For $57, you can pledge at the drone level, and that's going to add in kind of 3 expansion modules. One is a 5th player expansion, so it'll raise the max player count from 4 to 5. And the other 2 are sort of gameplay expansions that add in more mechanics. One is called Robots, that adds in some cards and some meeples and adds these remote access locations that players will be able to use during the game. The second one is called White Dwarf, and that's going to add in a very special location to the game that has a rondelle. The next pledge level is for $86. It's called Fleet. It's going to include everything that we've talked about previously and also a playmat. And then the final pledge level is for $135. It's called Solar. It's going to give you everything that we've talked about for Solar Sphere, including that playmat. And then it's also going to give you the Kickstarter edition of Solar Storm, their previous game, and a playmat for that game. And then finally, Dronda Games is looking to deliver Solar Sphere in August of 2022. Next up is Artisans of Splendent Vale, which is going to complete its funding on October 8th. Now, this game had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently sitting at $144,000, which is over 14 times that minimum required funding goal. It has a player count of 2 to 4 players. There's actually no time recommended on this one. It's one of the very few games I've seen that doesn't have a sort of time estimate for gameplay, so we don't really know how long games are going to be. But I put the complexity at medium light and the risk at low. And the reason is that it's being published by Renegade Game Studios. They're a big publisher and they've run a lot of Kickstarters as well. Now, this is a cooperative game with action events, storytelling, and legacy. It's designed by Nikki Valens, who's previously worked on Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, Eldritch Horror, Legacy of Dragonholt, and Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And we have 4 artists on this game. The first artist is named Lil Chan. Lil Chan's previously worked on Dice Miner. Then there's Cleonique Hilsaka and Lisa Pierce, and for both of those artists, this appears to be their first published game. And the final artist is Christina Petrie, who's previously worked on the Rocks. Finally, the game is being published by Renegade Game Studios, who has previously published Architects of the West Kingdom, Clank, a deck-building game, Clank Legacy, Acquisitions Incorporated, Paladins of the West Kingdom, and Raiders of the North Sea. And something I just want to make note of, I thought that the North Sea and West Kingdom games were published by Garphill Games. That is the company that's run by Shem Phillips, the designer. But what I think has happened is that Garphill publishes the initial versions of the games, the Kickstarter versions, and then when they go into kind of mass retail production, I believe Renegade Games is involved with those retail editions. Now, there are a few pledge levels for this one that include stuffed animals, plushies, and I'm not going to talk about all of those. I only cover pledge levels that actually include a copy of the physical game. And the first pledge level that does include the game is the $99 pledge level called Core. You can also pledge at the $114 pledge level. That is called Core Game plus Recharge Pack, because this is a legacy game, but if you want to be able to play it another time, you might want to get that Recharge Pack. I'm looking at it kind of like Charterstone, which had a Recharge Pack available. And for Charterstone, you could flip the board over to the other side and then play on that side. So you would essentially have kind of 2 different games going. I'm not quite sure how it's being integrated into this game, but just know that if you look at the campaign and you think you're really going to like it, and you think you may want to play the legacy game more than once, consider pledging at the level with that Recharge Pack. Now, finally, for $179, there is a pledge level called All In plus 3 plushies. And that is the level that will get you the core, the Recharge package, and then all 3 plushies. It's like $64 for 3 stuffed animals, so it's up to you whether you think that is of value. For me, I'd probably just pledge the game. And then finally, Renegade Game Studios is looking to deliver Artisans of Splendent Vale in August 2022. From there, we're going to look at a campaign that has 3 games included in one campaign. And that is Pergamon 2nd Edition, Armonia, and Sagani. Now, this is a campaign that had a minimum required funding goal of $17.5 thousand. They are currently sitting at $19,000, which is kind of just over funding. I mean, they're going to fund, they're fine, but they're sitting just over that 1 times level. Now, the player counts are a little bit different for these 3 games. So for Pergamon, it plays at 2 to 4 players. For the other 2 games, which are kind of connected, they're both Uwe Rosenberg designs and they're in the same universe. Armonia and Sagani both play 1 to 4 players, so there is a solo mode for both of those. Now, Pergamon's going to play in 45 minutes, and Armonia and Sagani are listed as 30 to 60 minutes. Also, Pergamon is a medium light game, and Armonia and Sagani are both light games. And finally, we're setting the risk at this whole campaign at low. It's being published by Eagle Gryphon Games. They're a very prominent publisher. They've published a lot of games, and they've run a lot of Kickstarters. They are probably one of the safest publishers that you could pledge with. Now, mechanically, Pergamon is a tile placement and set collection game. It's themed around Turkey in 1878 and archaeological excavations. The other two games are more abstracts, and Sagani has actually been out for a while. If you go on to Amazon, you may be able to buy it right now. I think it's selling for around $45, but it seems to generally be out of print, so you may not be getting the best price for it, and it may be hard to find, but if you look hard and you do your research, it's possible that you could find a copy of Sagani new right now at a decent price. You just may have to do some hunting. And Sagani, the game that's been out for a while, that is sort of abstract strategy and tile placement, and players are looking to achieve harmony between the four different elements. Now, Armonia, the newer game, is set in the Sagani universe, but that's more of a dice-rolling race game. Now, there's two designers on Pergamon. The first is Stefan Dora. He has previously designed For Sale, Medina, and Turn the Tide. The other designer, Ralph Zerlind, has previously designed Animals on Board, Dizzle, and Finca. And then the artist on Pergamon is Clemens Franz, which is kind of interesting because Clemens Franz is an artist for a lot of the big Uwe Rosenberg games. But here in this Kickstarter, he's worked on Pergamon, and the two Uwe Rosenberg games have other artists. But the 5 games that Clemens Franz has worked on that are the top rated of his output on BGG are Agricola, Caverna the Cave Farmers, Clans of Caledonia, Le Havre, and Orléans. Now, the other two games, Armonia and Sagani, are designed by Uwe Rosenberg. He's had a very interesting career, and he's designed a lot of games. A lot of his output are these kind of Euros, games like Caverna and Agricola and Feast for Odin. He's also done a lot of kind of tile placement games like Patchwork and the Cottage Garden Trilogy. And now, interestingly enough, with Sagani and Armonia, it seems like he's beginning to carve out this third niche with these kind of colorful abstracts. But the 5 games of his that are the top rated games are Agricola, Caverna the Cave Farmers, A Feast for Odin, Fields of Arle, and Le Havre. Now, the artist on Sagani is Lucas Siegman. He's previously worked on Hallertau, Nova Luna, and Recall, which is, again, interesting because those are some of the more recent Uwe Rosenberg games. And so it almost seems like he's kind of taken over the role of constant Uwe Rosenberg artist from Clemens Franz within the last couple of years. And then the artist on Armonia is named David Cochard, and he's previously worked on Alchemists, Codenames Pictures, Dungeon Lords, Dungeon Pets, and Tashkalar Arena of Legends. And then finally, all 3 games are published by Eagle Gryphon Games. Their top 5 games are Brass Lancashire, The Gallerist, On Mars, Through the Ages, A Story of Civilization, and Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. Now, the pledge levels here are kind of interesting because most of them are Europe and North America only. So you won't be able to pledge this game if you're not in Europe or North America. So at the $23 pledge level, Armonia, you're going to be able to pledge just Armonia, and again, that's for North America and Europe only. At the $32 pledge level, Sagani, you're going to be pledging Sagani only. Again, that's North America and Europe only. At the $34 pledge level, you can pledge Pergamon 2nd Edition. Again, that's Europe and North America only. Then for $53, you can pledge Armonia and Sagani together, but again, that is North America and Europe only. And then the $85 pledge level is a bundle for Pergamon, Armonia, and Sagani. It's all 3 games, and that also is Europe and North America only. And then finally, Eagle Gryphon Games is looking to deliver all 3 games in August of 2022. Now that brings us to our final game of the currently running Kickstarter section, and that is Shasn Azadi. This is also going to complete their funding on October 8th. They started with a minimum required funding goal of $30,000. They're currently at $156,000, which is over 5 times that initial required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 2 to 5 players. It plays in 90 to 180 minutes, so that's an hour and a half to 3 hours. It's not a short game. It's not that complicated a game, but it's not that short a game. And the reason I know this is I have the original game Shasn, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Complexity, I'd say it's a medium-heavy game. Shasn starts out feeling very light in the beginning, and by the time it finishes, it feels kind of more in the medium-heavy range. And I think Azadi is going to be similar. I even think Azadi may be a little bit of a heavier game and a better game. And then we're going to put the risk on this one at medium high. Now, the publisher here has only delivered one game, which is Shasn, but I personally backed it. I have it. I think they did a very, very good job with it, with the delivery of that Kickstarter. And I have faith in these guys, so I'm giving them a little bit of a bump from high to medium high because I feel that they've earned it and I think they're trustworthy. Now, this is sort of a political game. The new version, Azadi, it's different than the original. It's an expansion, but it's also a standalone game. And it has a modular board, which I think is going to make it an even better game than Shasn. It's also thematically a little bit different. Shasn has to do with elections. Azadi has to do with revolutions. But mechanically, they're very similar and they kind of start from the same place. But I think the way they've kind of evolved what they've done from the original game to this one, from what I've seen, it looks like a very, very nice jump in terms of kind of mechanics and the way they've integrated the mechanical systems within the game. But both games, kind of in a nutshell, are still sort of politically themed, even the Revolution game, Azadi, and they're really at their core area majority games. Now, there are two designers for Azadi. One is Adeshak Lamba, and this is Adeshak's first published game. The other designer is Zane Miman, and Zane previously designed the original Shasn. The artist here, Sumik Lahiri, a very, very distinctive style, also did the art on Shasn. And the publisher is Zane Miman and Company's company. It's called Nemesis Culture Lab, and they previously published Shasn. Now, there are a bunch of pledge levels for this one. I think there's 6. The first pledge level is called Booster Pack. It's only $5. If you own the original Shasn game, there were 5 campaigns in that game. And so the game in general is about elections, but it's going to be different kind of topically and thematically. The questions that are asked are going to be different depending on which campaign you use. There was one campaign that was in Rome, in BC. There was a campaign in the future in 2040, and then they had 3 kind of 2019 to 2020 campaigns. One was Brexit, one was India, and one was the US. So the booster packs are going to be booster packs for 2 of those campaigns, the USA campaign and the India campaign. And incidentally, both of those campaigns are included in the retail version. If you want the Shasn retail version, you can pledge that pledge level. It's for $80, and because that version is already out there, that's going to deliver early in October of 2021. Everything else is going to deliver later, and I will tell you that date when I get to the end of the pledge levels. But the Shasn retail game, if you only order that version, October 2021, like as soon as the campaign ends, those things will ship. Now, for $99, you can get Shasn standalone. So what that means is it's going to be the version of Shasn that includes those 2 extra campaigns. And I think there are also additional components, Kickstarter components, that won't be in the retail version. If you like the game, I would definitely recommend not getting the retail version. Get the Kickstarter version. So the Shasn standalone will include the Brexit campaign and the 2040 campaign, and neither of those campaigns are in the retail version. However, the booster packs that are available for $5, those are for the USA and India campaigns. So if you have the retail version, you can still get those booster packs, and they'll both be fully functional and useful. But if you get the standalone version, you will also get the booster packs with that pledge, and that pledge will include the Brexit and 2040 campaigns that are not in the retail version. I think there may also be some other components that are only included with the Kickstarter version. And I just would recommend to you that if you think you're going to like the game, if you like the look of the game and the gameplay that you've seen, get the Kickstarter version. Don't mess with the retail version. Now, for $99, you can also pledge for Azadi. And the interesting thing here is that Azadi is going to use some of the components from Shasn. So if you already have the original Shasn game, you can pledge this Azadi for $99. However, if you don't have Shasn and you're only pledging Azadi, you need to pledge at the $125 level. That is the Azadi standalone pledge. And the reason for that is that it includes some components that are available in the original Shasn game that you won't have if you don't have Shasn. So if you're not getting that, if you're only getting Azadi, you need to pledge that more expensive Azadi pledge, the $125, to make sure you get all the components that you need for it. And finally, if you'd like to get both games, you won't need that Azadi standalone game because you will get the components that you need for Azadi in the Shasn game. So you're going to pledge the $198 pledge level. That's for Shasn and Azadi. And then finally, Memesis Culture Lab is looking to deliver Azadi, Shasn Azadi, in February 2023. So just be aware that is more than a year off. It's not February 2022, which is 4 months away. It's a year after that. And that concludes the currently running Kickstarters for this week's edition of the Kickstarter Weekly. Now, I personally have 2 pledged games from last week's video. The first of those is Agemonia. Now, that is sort of a miniatures exploration and storytelling game from Lotta Polite. That's the team that did Eclipse, Second Dawn of the Galaxy, and I think it looks fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that. If you want to know more about the game, you can take a peek at last week's video where I broke the game down just like I broke the games down that are currently running this week. I don't have too much more to say about it. I just think it looks like it's hitting my sweet spot in terms of kind of thematic exploration games, and I'm really looking forward to playing it when it eventually delivers. The other game that I pledged was 11 Football Manager board game that was on GameFound. It is a sort of campaign game that has to do with managing soccer teams, and it looks like it has a lot of similarities to me with Portal's game Pret-a-Porter, which was about managing a dressmaking studio and going on the road to fashion events and shows and making dresses and showing them off. So it seems kind of mechanically similar, different designers, same publisher, but I like Pret-a-Porter a lot, and it looks to me like it's going to have some similar mechanical systems, and it just looks like a really good game in terms of kind of how you're managing players. It could be anything, right? It could be any other sport. It just happens to be soccer. But mechanically, it looks pretty fascinating to me, and I went all in on it. I got all the expansions, and I like Portal games. I think they make really good stuff. Now, I also have 2 acquired games this period. The first of those is Merlin Big Box. It came in right as I was shooting the previous video last week. I was shooting it very late. And I don't really have too many Stefan Feld games. I have Luna, the deluxeified version. Stefan Feld games just always felt a little old school and kind of generic to me when I was first starting playing board games again a few years ago. And so I kind of passed by a lot of Feld stuff. But you can't deny his kind of weight in the industry and how much he's done and how many good games he really has. So I've been slowly trying to acquire more. The first one was Luna Deluxeified. The second one was this Merlin Big Box, which I'm really excited about. I think it looks very cool and different. And I think it's a game that my fiance Kristen is actually really going to like. And then I've been pledging the new kind of Stefan Feld collection games. The first 2 I pledged with the previous campaign. I know if you're trying to get all 4 on the current campaign, the prices are getting kind of insane. I will say that for me, when I'm pledging that Stefan Feld collection, I'm not getting any of the metal coins. I think they're completely unnecessary, and I think if you do not get those metal coins, it keeps the costs down. But right now I'm pledging the new Stefan Feld collection Kickstarter, the one that has the 3rd and 4th games in the series. I think it's New York City and Marrakesh. And so those are just kind of, those are 4 more Stefan Feld games, which will eventually be coming into my collection. But I am really looking forward to Merlin, and I hope that I can get it played soon. I do have a lot of games and videos I need to get produced first, and games that I'm playing for specific videos. So Merlin may be a little ways off, but I think it looks cool, and I'm really excited to try it out. The other game that I finally received is Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down, and I have been waiting for this one to deliver for maybe a year. The original game was published by King Raccoon Games. That's Felix Mercatat's company. Then Grey Fox jumped on and they said, we want to do a better, kind of more pimped up version of Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down, and we're going to put all these miniatures into it. It looked really cool. And it's sort of a miniature skirmish game with factions that are very asymmetric. So one faction may have a lot of minis, the other one may just have a few more powerful minis. And there's this kind of very unique theming to the game where I think the moon has slammed into the earth. It's changed the Earth's trajectory around the sun in some way. All life does not seem to have gone away from planet Earth, but there are some very kind of unique factions that are still around. And it just seems such a crazy theme. I was really excited by it, so I pledged it, and there were all kinds of problems with that Kickstarter. I finally have it delivered this week. All of the boxes look okay, but I've heard a lot of horror stories from people in Europe who got the game a while back that the components are not good quality, not the quality that was promised. So I need to open up all of my boxes, kind of take a look through it and see what condition it's in. I'm hoping that I kind of escape the worst of some of the problems that I've seen, but this is probably one of the, along with Barrage, two of the most problematic Kickstarters that I've personally backed. I'm glad to finally have it here. I'm glad that everything's in one piece. I'm glad that it looks undamaged, but now I need to go into the packages and see what kind of shape that they're in. Now, this is a game that I actually am looking to cover, so if everything's looking good, I probably will get a first impressions video out on Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down in a few weeks. I have some catch-up work to do first. Let's take a very quick look at what's coming for the rest of the week. So I'm actually shooting this video on a Saturday. From there, I will then be editing the Shasn first impressions video, which has already been shot, and I'll probably put that one out on Sunday night or possibly Monday morning. I may wait until Monday morning to kind of promote it on social media, because I have a feeling if I do get the Shasn first impressions video edited on Sunday in addition to this video, it would get published so late that if I kind of did, social media promotions at that time, I don't think people would see it. So that means for the rest of the week, from Tuesday on, the videos that you probably will see published in this order are going to be my August Games of the Month video, followed by a teach and review for Chronicles of Crime 1400, and then I will look to complete and get published my first impressions videos for Embarcadero and Kemet Blood and Sand. And then, of course, also at the end of next week, there will be another Kickstarter Weekly. And I don't want to talk about anything beyond that right now. I'll talk about that during next week's Kickstarter Weekly. But if I can get all 6 of those videos published by, let's say, next Saturday, I'll be super happy. And then on next week's Kickstarter Weekly, I can talk about what's coming the following week. So for those of you who keep watching my videos, I really, really appreciate it. I'm building this channel up. There's going to be a lot of fun, cool stuff as I grow the channel out, as we expand into Twitch. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have a great week. Hopefully there's something in here you may want to pledge, and I will have helped you out a bit. If you haven't subscribed or liked the video, please consider doing that down below. And also, if any of the currently running Kickstarters I've been talking about appeal to you, you can always go down into the description of the video, and I have links for every campaign, so you can just pop over to the campaign, take a look at it, pledge it if you like. Okay, everyone, thank you again, and I will see you very soon. I should have a lot of videos coming out this week, so keep watching.